We're going to pause between our prayer for Canada and our prayer for Israel to invite to come forward a very special member of our community now. Yossi Klein Halevi is known to our congregation through his scholarship and his journalistic work, through the many webinars and Zooms that we've encouraged you to attend, and articles in Times of Israel, Haaretz, and the New York Times that we have shared through our I Engage program over the last number of years. He's known for all of those things, and we are pleased to be able to have his voice with us this morning. But what's more important, what you may not know about Yossi, is that Yossi and Sarah have a brand new granddaughter who lives in North Vancouver. And so he gets to be in our community, and we are so privileged to be able to be a host for you while you're here. And so, Yossi, it's a pleasure to welcome you and Sarah and Mazel Tov on the granddaughter. We enjoy and looking forward to hearing a few words. Thank you.
If I go for like 7 to 10, is that okay? Great. Shabbat Shalom. Shana Tova. Thank you, Rabbi Dan, Rabbi Carey, Cantor Shani. I'm just delighted to be here and participate in this beautiful service, and I look very much forward to getting to know this warm community. My wife Sarah and I recently celebrated our 40th anniversary of joining the State of Israel as immigrants. And in these 40 plus years, we've experienced the full force of the Israeli roller coaster. War, peace, nonstop terrorism. We've known inflation that reached 400% to 500%. That was the state of the Israeli economy when we first got to Israel. Then we experienced the miracle of the startup nation, the massive influx of immigrants from the former Soviet Union, from Ethiopia. Excuse me. And yet in all this time on the Israeli roller coaster, I can't remember a more difficult and painful and traumatic year than we've experienced in this last year. We are dealing with a coalition unlike any government we've ever experienced in Israel, a convergence of religious fundamentalism, far-right nationalism, and mere corruption. I have spent all these years writing and lecturing through North American Jewish communities, and I've always delivered one essential message, which is pay attention to voices across the spectrum in Israeli society, because there's truth on the right, there's truth on the left, in religious Israel, secular Israel, Arab Israelis, Jewish Israelis. In order to understand and really appreciate the complexity of Israel, you need to listen to the whole of Israeli society. And my position was always animated by a rabbinic dictum, which was Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. Until this year. Now in Israel, we're confronting a situation for the first time that I've experienced, where there are no two sides. There are no two legitimate sides. One side is trying to destroy the foundations of Israeli democracy, and the other side, the side that is in the streets every week for the last 37 weeks, sometimes more than once a week, waving giant Israeli flags. That side is trying to save the Israel that's embodied by the two flags on the bima. These two flags represent the entwinement of Jewish and democratic values. That is the Israel that the diaspora fell in love with, and that's the Israel that we're fighting to preserve. And yet, at the same time that this has been the most painful year that I've experienced as an Israeli, it may sound strange to say this, but it's also been the most exhilarating year. The year when I have the privilege of standing week after week with hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets who I know are sharing the same anguish, the same sleepless nights that I am, who are going through that same sense of disbelief and outrage that this government dares to speak in the name of the dream that animated the Jewish people for 2,000 years, dares to desecrate the good name of Zionism. And it's no coincidence that I'm sure you've all seen images of the demonstrations. The most striking image are thousands of giant Israeli flags. This is not an outbreak of disaffected, disillusioned Israelis. Quite the opposite. This is an outbreak of patriotic Zionist Israel, of centrist Israel. This is not a left-wing demonstration. This is moderate left, centrist, and moderate right, all joining together to save the Israel that we always took for granted as being normative Zionism. The slogan of the protest movement is one word, one Hebrew word, busha, shame, disgrace. And that word sums up the sensibility of the protest movement, which is, we in the streets are representing normative Zionism. And how dare you, this government, disgrace everything that we have fought for and died for all these years. One of the most moving experiences is to see leaders of democratic movements from Hungary, from Poland, coming to our protest movement, speaking, or just simply to observe. And we've had leaders of the movements in these countries that have experienced the transition, the decline of democracy to autocracy, pleading with us, continue, because what you're doing in Israel is an example, is a light for all those countries around the world, from India to Turkey to Eastern Europe, that are experiencing this moment of struggle to maintain democratic norms. I'm very hopeful about this coming year. And I'm hopeful precisely because the dormant, amorphous, indifferent center in Israel, which always allowed the more extreme voices to rule in the streets, has now been galvanized. Nothing will ever be the same in Israel because the center is now active. And all of those issues that we've allowed, that I've allowed as a centrist all these years, to slide, the ultra-Orthodox state within a state, the rise of settler violence in the territories, the rise of corruption in our politics, all those issues are now front and center. And I believe that Israel is going to be transformed in the long term, and that we'll know, as we always do, how to turn crisis into opportunity. And I'd like to conclude with an appeal to the diaspora. What is your role as lovers of Israel, as those who are watching from afar with growing anxiety? What is your role at this moment? First of all, I would plead with you all to draw closer rather than farther away. When someone you love is in trouble, the impulse is to help, to find out what can I do, even if that trouble is self-inflicted, as it is today. This is a time for the diaspora to reaffirm the Israel that you love, the Israel that you believe, the Israel that we aspire for. It is also a time for us to begin learning to speak two simultaneous languages on Israel. The first is unequivocal defense of Israel and Zionism against those who would turn the Jewish state into the criminal of nations. No quarter for the anti-Zionists, for the BDS movement. At the same time, we need to learn to speak a language of self-critique, of moral credibility, of not allowing those in our midst who, God forbid, would turn Israel into the kind of country that our enemies say we already are. And so my prayer for the coming year is that this will bring the diaspora and Israel closer together in a reaffirmation of the two flags on the bima and the sensibility that those two flags represent, that this will be the year of victory for sane Israel, for decent Israel, for democratic and Jewish Israel. I wish you all a year of blessings, and I look intensely forward to engaging over the coming year. Thank you, and Shana Tova.
As we call up those that are going to lead our congregation in a prayer for Israel, I just want to add one more point. And we haven't promoted this yet, but on the Tuesday night after Yom Kippur, on the 26th of September, there will be two leaders of the Israeli protest movement here in Vancouver, speaking here in our congregation in partnership with a number of communities and congregations and organizations here in Vancouver. They're stopping here, and then they're going to Seattle. You'll see after the holiday information in your email about that. I hope you'll join us on Tuesday night, the 26th, for that important program.